I feel like my state just showed up and boldly told me that they are going to take care of me and my female friends and everyone that can get pregnant in the state of Kansas. We are protected tonight.
We saw Kansas voters decide that they want their state constitution to continue to protect a right to abortion. And in practical terms, what that means is that it will make it very difficult for the state legislature to pass meaningful restrictions or certainly any kind of a broad-ranging ban on abortion. The one caveat to that is that this was the first time that a state got to weigh in on the question of abortion since we had this decision in June. This will be a wake-up call to Republicans around the country. It will be read as a sign that even in a pretty conservative state, there seems to be enough voter upset over this decision that it really drove people out to the polls in large enough numbers to defeat an amendment that most had expected.
It was a rare sight that we haven't seen much of since the Supreme Court then voted to overturn Roe versus Wade back in June. Out in Kansas voters voted opposite though, because I think we're trying to finally beginning to see what people, when they get activated by kinds of horrible legislating, or in this case, decisions that'll be made in our judicial system, and the response that then comes. Let's go to some more details because this happened out in Kansas, as I mentioned, because this was the biggest warning to Republicans, as written by CNN here, many of whom have trumpeted the overturning of Roe versus Wade backed pushes to stricter abortion laws. It's perhaps the turnout in Kansas, with 78% of the vote on Tuesday night. Nearly 700,000 people have cast ballots in that primary, a figure that already dwarfs the turnout in the 2020 presidential primary election. So over on the right side of this thing, the brain trust at Fox News was trying to figure a way to spin this. Because look, this is what they were noticing in that opening video there. They're like, look, we weren't really sure where our country stood. We kind of figured, but are we within our own like lib bubbles that people actually like freedom and people's decisions for their own bodies and their own lives? But we have a little bit more confirmation. So of course, Fox News said this about it instead.
Kansas referendum is very interesting. I do think that pro-lifers should understand that so much money was spent by hardcore abortion supporters to make sure that that amendment failed. It also was a pretty, there's a lot that was packaged there, and I think that usually pro-life initiatives do much better when they're incremental. And so it's a reminder also that as Roe v. Wade was overturned and abortion law and policy is returned to the states where people get to weigh in, there's a lot of work to be done for people who want to protect women and children from the scourge of abortion, or people who want to make sure that it is enshrined in law. So there's a lot more to be done there, and we'll see a lot more in the years to come.
It was the money being spent, Jessica. It was the money being spent by those lib groups trying to murder more babies. When previous to this, I remember when they were celebrating the decision by the Supreme Court, they were talking about how this has been decades and decades of work in the making. Was it with no money? Molly, I think it's Molly Hemingway. Was that with no money, or was that just people walking around not getting paid, people not actually advocating and lining politicians' pockets as they get elected to say you're gonna have to vote my way or else I'm gonna stop supporting you with my cash? But they're gonna say it's the other way around. The wonder is how many people are gonna believe them.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is the right now on board with the notion that money in politics is a problem? Oh, shocking. But let's just briefly address where some money was coming from in this effort. So the folks that were for the no vote were collecting a bunch of donations, but I'm far more interested in those who did want to amend the Constitution. They had $5.4 million. $3.5 million that was spent on influencing a ballot initiative came from Catholic churches directly in the state of Kansas. That is insane. The fact that it's legal for the Catholic Church to influence our politics is nuts, but of course, they're not gonna talk about that.
No, come on, please. Catholic Church, they're untouchable. That's not really something we want to discuss. Now, the second part of this, really fast, because we have a couple minutes left, is if this really does show what could be upcoming in the midterms, because again, they figure, hey, it's a primary vote. Let's put it on this ballot here, which we're going to get to. But will it really lead to this type of result, maybe off in November? So let's go to this. This anti-abortion movement has long claimed that voters would reward Republicans for overturning Roe. Conservative lawyers and many Republican politicians convinced themselves this was true. They're now discovering how delusional that conviction has always been. Remembering that Republicans scheduled this Kansas abortion referendum for the primary rather than the general election because there were many more registered Republicans in the state than Democrats, and unaffiliates can't vote in primary races, is what Stern also said. Abortion rights still won handily. So again, Jessica, with that in mind, your last thoughts on this. Is this gonna, since it's Kansas, as many people see as this conservative state, is that gonna be one of those things that leads us to see this has actually activated so many more, I'm not even gonna say independent or Democratic voters, just voters that don't want this to be the thing that dictates their life? Because I'm sure there's plenty of Republicans that also want their rights.
Right, yeah, I would be so excited if we saw that a bunch of people turned out, and actually we saw increased turnout in the other races, but there were so many people that came and cast a ballot just for this. So a lot of people, are saying at the doors, we talked to a few candidates last night, that they are now single issue voters and the thing that they care about is abortion rights. But if they're not politically activated in voting in other races on the same ballot, that's concerning, and it goes to show that perhaps Nancy Pelosi's strategy of go out to the polls and vote for Democrats might not be effective, right? People are motivated to turn out if they know this is precisely what they're voting for. But when it's tacked on to a party that isn't doing much for them, I don't think you can use abortion rights as an excuse for not doing much else and running on that one thing.
Maybe we can pass that message on to Nancy and they'll switch and start actually talking about policy versus trying to promote the horrific policies of their opponents. How about you give us something in return? No, we'll see. Maybe she's learning something on this latest trip.